empathy is the gold currency of communication, and a real way in which we can offer the kind of care to help somebody who's dysregulating. And don't you appreciate that when someone
Mm-hmm.
does that for you? I know I do. It's actually really humbling when I'm dysregulated and you or someone else, like my kids, actually are like the one that's like, I see you're upset,
Yeah.
and it's so humbling. And that's, I think, a beautiful gift that we can give to each other, especially in marriage, in relationship, and with our kids, is just to give. We talk about saving some of the best for those you love the most. This is the place where you really want to practice that.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted Podcast, helping leaders live with integrity.
Well, hi, Jeff.
Hey, Terra.
Today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, big emotions. And the reason it's one of my favorite topics is because it is probably the most applicable to every relationship that matters most to us, whether it's our relationship with ourselves and God, our relationship with our spouse or our partner, our relationship with our kiddos, and those at work and in our communities. Emotions are just a real part of who we are as human beings. And it's often actually the number one thing that I get asked to speak on, whether it's talking to parents or whether it's talking at women's retreats or to leaders. Big emotions are there, whether you want them or not. So we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah, we oftentimes talk about how we wish that every kindergartner could be equipped with emotional intelligence and like understanding emotions, right? Because if that was in every school across the world, right, there would be less of a need to have to kind of teach that stuff a little later on after all the hard knocks of not knowing how to do that along the journey.
Well, I think the reality is that us parents are the ones who are helping a lot of these kindergartners, our caretakers and our teachers. And most of us don't know as adults how to do that. It's so much of the work that we're doing in our counseling and our coaching, and the work that Jeff and I have had to do. So I'll start with my own story with emotions. You can share your story with emotions. We'll talk a little bit about wiring and how the role that plays, and then maybe some tools on how to actually start to regulate and to care for your emotions, not to stuff them, ignore them. So that would be part of my story. I was like the ultra optimist, and I thought that not having negative emotions meant that I was more mature, that I was a great leader, that as a follower of Christ, that I was maybe even more mature and trusted God more because I didn't get disappointed. I didn't get angry. I didn't, have bad days. Everything was great. Okay, so I want to vomit right now because that also was really annoying to everyone around me. I mean, I think I got praised a lot for my optimism and my positive attitude. And I really was taught how to have a mind over matter mentality, to take my emotions, to set them on the side, and to do what was needed, whether that was in my sports, whether that was in my responsibilities, in my leadership, in my schoolwork. And I really practiced that all the way well into our marriage. And I don't know how well that did for me in the early years of marriage. We'll get to that. But I don't think it was really till my late 20s when I started to learn I actually have a lot more emotions than joyful and positive and happy, and good old marriage kicked that into gear. Okay, what's your story with emotions?
Oh gosh, I don't know what to pick. I mean, I was my household too. It was just like positivity was sort of the thing, right? So, and then kind of keeping up the appearance. How do you get through hard or difficult? You get through it by just pulling up your bootstraps and putting on a smile and working harder. And so, I mean, there's a lot of similarities to how we were both raised in that way. And it would take me some time as well to unpack the fact that, lots of things inside. And there's things that it's okay to actually be a guy, for example, and to actually have emotions other than anger, and happiness. So,
and hunger. I think that's the other.
That's a
I'm hungry.
Yeah,
is another emotion.
But just I'll just say this: that one of the things that was great, of course, is having kids. This a shared commitment to wanting them to understand the emotional palette, God created emotions. And I just remember that's kind of when I began really, I mean, I'd say to be on co-mission with you towards helping our girls understand this. And then me, the desire that I had to want to be a safe, dad. Right. So that supercharged already the work that I'd been doing previously, even as a single guy before we got married, towards wanting to be as healthy as I could be too, and struggling with, a lot of the things that I needed to work through from my experiences in family of origin stuff that had a lot of emotions buried, suppressed, and things would come out, and learning how to address those and turn towards those was really good and healthy for me, but hard work. So yeah, I would say being a dad accelerated some, and created new depth for my ability to understand emotions, and wanting, of course, having two girls was like, okay, I really want to be in the know on this, and to be available to them, and also not to let them, just let emotions reign all the time. Right. So what's the balance and how to practice that? So you've been a good teammate in that, of course.
Well, here's where the teammate part has come in. Is it benefited us before having kids to get some of the training that we got. Both you were in doing family ministries at the time. I was doing marriage and family therapy and play therapy training. And so here's the bottom line. Learning from a cognitive level the role of emotions can be really helpful for those of us who haven't practiced emotions, or maybe have a paradigm that emotions are weak. Sometimes in family systems, I call it the athlete mentality, no pain, no gain. We sometimes don't learn the difference between an injury and soreness, and we'll push past our emotional injuries for the sake of continuing to play the game and to be tough, and we get applauded. I know I did. It's tempting, even having girls who are athletes themselves, to applaud when they get back up and they get back in the game, even if they don't feel like it. Right. So that tension between honoring you're really struggling with being overwhelmed at school, and learning how to move through your emotions, the soreness, versus when you're injured and we really need to change your environment to be able to care for those emotions. Sometimes emotions can be used to manipulate in our homes, and so we think they're dangerous. Sometimes emotions are used to harm, right? Anger and abuse has a lot of emotions connected to it. So emotions can have a really negative connotations for some of us have grown up in more confusing homes, or in abusive homes, and in trauma homes. And so there's a general principle that comes out of the Alcoholics Anonymous world. And there's three principles that every alcoholic and dysfunctional family system abide by. They don't do this consciously. Okay. So it's not something that parents teach their kids overtly, but it just kind of is a part of the system. And it's one, we don't trust what people will say, because people will say a lot of promises, but they don't follow through in those family systems. So we don't trust. We don't talk about the real issues, because, we're just going to kind of work around it. We're all going to perform. We're going to make sure nobody gets angry, nobody gets sad. And we're just going to keep coping with a lot of performance and substances. And then the third is we don't feel. We're used to numbing out. We're used to pushing past our real emotions. And so those systems tend to be our normal until we grow up and we meet another family system, usually in the context of marriage. And then we want to parent our kids, or we're apart. Maybe we have friends or a mentor that actually has a safe way with emotions and wants to talk about things and can be trusted and actually wants to know how you feel and wants to care for those feelings. So you can see where a lot of us are uncomfortable with emotions, and others who grow up in healthy systems might think that's kind of odd. And what's the big deal? Emotions are just a part of life.
Not to sidetrack this, but just to integrate this. I mean, those of us that work in business and organizational settings, those oftentimes mirror some of the things that might have experienced in family systems, right? So that's at Living Wholehearted. We're talking about the fact that leaders, and that's a large part of who we work with, that they bring all who they are wherever they go. And so if you've ever been and worked for a boss, let's say of your organization, your workplace, who acted like a alcoholic father, I mean, where it wasn't safe to talk about the issues, it wasn't safe to process about them, and everybody's just sort of playing to that person to keep them happy.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And maybe you haven't thought about that before, but it's just interesting how we bring our tendencies from our families of origin into where the places that we go, and work is one of those places where we spend most of our waking hours.
And just thinking about Christian paradigm, I mean, you might have a really healthy family overall, but in Christian culture, sometimes emotions can be dismissed in the kind of discipleship we get, meaning we'll go to Romans 12, where we're talking about renewing our mind and not realizing that mind is a holistic word there. It isn't just our cognitive. We take our thoughts captive. We really focus on memorizing scripture and making sure that we're speaking truth to our souls, right? And that is a piece of discipleship.
A key piece,
but it's not the only part.
Right.
And so sometimes we forget, like, oh yeah, we might take a scripture that says, do not be anxious, but in prayer and petition, present your requests. And then we focus on the do not be anxious. And I always am like, I wonder why God would have a lot of emotions listed in there. And usually when I see something listed, I'm like, oh, he knows, he made us. So he knows we're going to be anxious. So it's not like a shaming, do not be anxious in Philippians. He's saying, when you're anxious, you don't have to stay there. You don't have to live in a perpetual anxiety place. Here are some practical things. And the neuroscience and the mental health actually reinforces anything that scripture is teaching us. But I think in certain Christian cultures, we actually dismiss emotions thinking they're not godly. We're supposed to have joy all the time. In fact, I'll never forget, Jeff. I think you were there. I don't know if you remember it the same way I did, but we were in a leadership conference.
Okay.
And I think I was getting triggered in the moment because the speaker up front was actually saying that despair and discouragement were not of God, and was in a way shaming a part of our humanity. And anybody in that room that has any sort of trauma or shame backdrop would feel bad and feel ungodly if they had any seasons of depression or seasons of real, the dark night of the soul times where we doubt and we question. And though that's not from God per se, God did give us those emotions. He gave us sadness and grief and loss and mourning, and life can get really hard. So it's not always the emotion that's ungodly. It's what we do with the emotion that is the sin or the struggle.
Yeah, emotions get a bad rap oftentimes in the church. That's what I'm hearing you say as well. And it's true. There's just a lot needs to be unpacked about that, and also across genders, because we oftentimes are hearing in circles, and maybe you have as well, just sort of that emotions are for females, and
are they the only ones that are emotional?
And the reframe is that it's good for them for females to have a balance with the guys because they can be less emotional and more cognitive. And there's lots of truths, of course, to being able to link together in terms of that. But you might be connected to somebody who is where both parties are very emotional, or both are very cognitive and not as emotional, and need to explore all of that. The point is that God made emotions. They are from him. We are human, and he wants us to experience these things. What we do with them is everything.
Well, that's the point. He made them. And Genesis 2 says that we're made in his image. Okay, when I read the Bible, I see God as a very emotional God. Now, does he sin in that emotion? Absolutely not.
No.
But he feels anger. He feels jealousy. He feels, there's even the weeping where Jesus weeps. So sadness,
joy, contentment,
excitement.
Creativity.
All these things we see in the person of Jesus, and then throughout the Old and the New Testament. So if God feels emotions, who are we to say that they're not good? as everything God made is good. So it's what we do with the things.
Yeah,
right?
Jesus got tired. God rested on the seventh day after creating creation. Did he need to? I don't know. He chose to.
He chose to.
Um,
Modeling that rest is good.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's all of the emotional palette is in there. It's very interesting.
Okay, so let's talk about the neuroscience real quick, and then we'll maybe dive into CBI. Okay, so Dr. Siegel, you hear us talk about him quite a bit. He was one of the ones that talks about interpersonal psychology and learning about the neurobiology and the impact of relationship and what happens when we offer empathy to one another in the midst of our emotions. He has this thing called the hand model. If you've been around us a little while, you might have heard us talk about the hand model. And I am going to do it because we do have YouTube. Those of you watching and those who are listening, I'll try to explain it. Jeff will fill in the gaps. But we have a downstairs brain and an upstairs brain. And if you have your hand, your upstairs brain is your four fingers. Your thumb is your amygdala, and your the part of your brain that's most primal. It's with you when you're a baby. The downstairs brain would be the palm of your hand. So the healthiest brains and the healthiest humans actually integrate both their upstairs brain and their downstairs brain. The upstairs brain is responsible for all the cognitive functioning, right? The A plus B equals C. I always say when I'm mad and if I wanted to kick Jeff, my upstairs brain says, that's not a good idea, Terra. It's the mature part of us. It kind of helps us to regulate that downstairs brain. Well, the downstairs brain is what's with us the moment we're born. This is the place where we are hungry, we're tired. It's where our sex drive is. It's where we respond and react in our five senses, what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we smell, and what we feel with our bodies. So God created it from our lens, our biblical worldview, is that he created it so that a baby would be mapping out all the way through their childhood, through their five senses, what is safe and what is unsafe. And those emotions are cues to create these neural pathways that help them map out what is safe and what is unsafe, who can be trusted, who can't be trusted. When I'm hungry, does someone come and comfort me, or do they ignore me? When I hurt myself, when I'm two and I fall, does someone come and help and hold me and comfort me? When I'm scared, do I find comfort or am I ignored? All of that is being mapped out in the downstairs brain, which is where our trauma gets held and where our automatic responses, our involuntary responses come in the world. So when you smell a certain pie, that is either associated with good memories of grandma's apple pie, or with really hurtful memories if grandma's apple pie was associated with really hurtful family memories. You might not know that consciously, but your body has mapped that out for you. Well, as we get older, from 24 to 28, our brain starts to develop this upstairs brain and they work together. A lot of us, especially leader types, we like to shut down that downstairs brain and try to become more cognitive and bossy with our emotions. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But a lot of my clients will speak the same, where we get frustrated with ourselves, which is an emotion, with feeling tired, feeling discouraged, feeling depressed, or, not motivated, sometimes really excited and overly passionate about something. Whatever it is that you're uncomfortable with, your upstairs brain might shut it down. Here's the piece. Sometimes we overvalue the upstairs brain. Sometimes we overvalue the downstairs brain, depending on our family of origin and our wirings. But the healthy brain values both emotions and cognitive thinking. And if they can work together, that's going to be the healthiest version of ourselves. The problem is we kind of need each other to do that well in the way that we were designed. We actually need other human beings to help us learn what we feel, and then to find comfort and to be able to speak truth, or more cognitive truth, to that. So the parenting part of the brain is helping the downstairs brain. Neither are bad, neither are good or better than. Together, they are the best version of ourselves. Okay, did I say that okay? Or is there anything you want to add?
Well, the part that I'm hung up on is just the
Okay.
fact that you used to say that when your upstairs brain, when you wanted to kick something, it was the dog, but now you put me in there. So I got a problem with that. That's been hard to let go.
Oh gosh, you guys, we're not violent. I do have a bent though when I'm angry. I found this out in my 20s that when I'm angry, I didn't have my sports to take it out on. And so Jeff and I both found that I would get so angsty in my body.
We bought you a punching bag.
He bought me a punching bag, and I started doing a lot of kickboxing and very assertive. In order to get that angst out, knowing that anger is a very intense emotion and it needs an outlet that's intense as well. So yeah. I haven't kicked Jeff. It was just the thought that sometimes I want to kick.
We got rid of your punching bag and I got one. And so
your turn to be angry.
It's a good release now and then. It just grab a hold of that thing.
So talk about a little bit about your journey of learning to regulate your emotions. So thinking about the brain and when the brain starts to get flipped is what
right.
Dr. Siegel says, is that the blood is literally leaving the frontal lobe. Mm-hmm. It's going to the downstairs brain because those five senses have picked up some sort of danger. Mm-hmm. The body starts to create an intensity, and now we move into our downstairs brain and we start sending on overdrive. And so in order to regulate that, we have to learn to care for those emotions, not dismiss them or ignore them. So talk about how you've learned to do that over the years.
Well, let me just say that has been so powerful in my life. Just knowing these things actually and what is actually happening. It gave me perspective that I just did not have. And it allowed me to basically focus in on some things that I did have as a core commitment, as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a business leader, and somebody working with clients. I wanted to grow, always want to grow, want to be more mature. This has actually been so practically helpful to me. Just knowing that it takes, for example, 30 minutes when blood has left the frontal lobe in my life and gone to the amygdala. 30 minutes when it's full on gone, and I'm at my worst. And
that's what the research says.
Yeah, I'm intimidating, I'm yelling, or I'm cutting something off, or, just at my worst, dysregulated. Taking that break, it always made sense to take a break, but I didn't know it needed to be 30 minutes for the blood to fully return. Now, if I'm kind of able to catch myself in those moments and learning how to catch yourself, because your body tells you, it begins to communicate to you that you're about ready to lose it. And for me, I remember when we talked about the lid sort of teetering, it hadn't flipped fully. It was so powerful to know that my body had some body language that was like a cue. And I was like, I really don't know, how my body would show that I'm about to lose it. And you're like, well, I know.
You're talking about me?
Yeah. And I said, well, what do I do? And you said, well, you do this. You clench your jaw, and you do this with your hands when your arms are hanging down. And I'm like, no, I don't. You're like, yeah, you do. And I'm like, no, I don't. And I spent the next week, of course, Ben Franklining this in detail, recording. And I had to catch myself. I was doing those things before, when I would feel a rub with something or someone or whatever it might have been, came back and humbled myself and said, "You're right. Now tell me a little bit more."
Did you?
Yeah, I did. That's how I know about this stuff, huh? That's how I know about this stuff. And so now, of course, I teach my clients, what are your physical signs? Do you get tight shoulders? Do you get clammy hands, heavy in the chest, whatever it might be? These are signs that are moments of anxiety that show up really quick in that critical crossroads where you can regulate. And regulating for me means that I got to notice what's going on. Okay, I'm clenching my jaw. I'm doing this thing with my hands or whatever it is. Why am I upset? What's going on? What's the emotion? What's the issue? What's the thing that is impacting me? And instead of just going to reaction more, I'm going to responding because this stuff works. And I can think and get perspective inside myself in matters of seconds now that I couldn't do before by examining and pausing and connecting to the question of wisdom. what would wisdom say in these moments is a question that's connecting to our core values index, that tool that we use to help us with regulation. But the long story short is that knowing that this is what's going on in my body and in my brain, and that there are physical symptoms that I can catch early that can help me regulate, has been awesome. It's been really awesome. It feels like I've grown. Would you say I've grown over the years?
You have grown.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. And I always say that. I can ask my wife and my kids if I've grown. They said I have. And so it's like, hey, I'm still growing. That's good. But this is empowering. It's empowering, especially if you are more of a charged kind of person that reacts with volume increase, intensity. That's a wiring type, right? That's every reaction of dysregulation is not healthy. And but this was helpful and helpful for me.
That's good. Your wiring type, or our wiring types, is we refer to the core values index. You can listen to our one of our last episodes where we go over the core values index. But each core value responds to emotions in different ways. So we all feel similar emotions. We feel happy, sad, angry, disappointed, frustrated, betrayed. I mean, there is a list. You ask us counselors, there is a huge list of emotions. But even just getting the basics down for yourself. One of my favorite lists is from the book, the Yurkoviches, How We Love, and they have soul words, and you can print that out and put it on your refrigerator as a place to kind of practice identifying, what do I feel today? I have a 5-step process that I teach both in Courageous Girls and any leaders that we're working with in our Living Wholehearted practice. And it's 5 steps to help us identify those emotions and then to care for those emotions so that we can get to a place of regulation. So the first one, and again, this came out of my own personal journey of trying to understand my emotions. Being a high merchant, if you are a merchant, we just naturally have a lot of emotions. How we respond to those emotions is a lot of how we're taught in our communities, but also what our second and our third and fourth wirings are. So this is where I had a lot more emotions I didn't know I had. I didn't realize how tender I was, because I'm such a cognitive person and my innovator, and I can kind of think myself through any of my emotions. I can kind of do the I'm sad, but, right? Like, it'll be better tomorrow. Sad, but other people have it worse than me. I'm sad, but, and I can do a lot of minimizing to myself. And so my practice was learning I'm sad, period. Where am I sad? Jeff talking about the body. The body actually tells you and gives you a warning sign. And I often feel sadness. I can feel sadness in my eyes. I literally will start to well up with some tears. And I can feel sadness a bit in my chest and in my core. And when I'm feeling sad, it's usually some sense of there's a loss. I can feel sad for myself. I can also feel sad for others in relationship. And I feel a loss. Like, it could have been different, that feeling of all of the wreckage of whether choices have been hurtful or things didn't go the way I thought it would. But just recognize that sadness has a lot of voices, and it shows up in the body. So can I name the emotion? Where does it show up in my body? And then giving it a voice. This is such a cheesy thing as a counselor, but I tell you, I think in word pictures and very much ways that help really get to the next action step. And so the action step is, if sadness could talk, what would it say? And I don't like to feel sad. I don't. But when I'm able to give it a voice, it starts to make more sense to my cognitive part of myself. And when I can say I'm sad because my daughters are going through a really hard season, and I wanted it to be different for them in this moment. Or I'm sad that, it's not working out well with the vision that I had for our work. Or I'm just sad that we just lost our dog. Just give it a voice. And oftentimes that helps us. You'll notice many of us who didn't practice using emotions very often don't know why we feel what we feel. So this is the step of practicing that, giving it a voice.
Before you move on to the fourth and the fifth. Let me just make a quick note here to anybody that's out there that's listening. It's like starting to laugh and make fun of this stuff.
Hey,
Like, no. Listen, this happens. You know, this happens. And I used to even be somebody that felt sort of that way. Like, I'm going to give my emotion a voice, and here's what it's saying.
He's mocking me.
Here's what it's saying. No, like that could seem so cheesy, right? But the pushback that people have towards these things, and I'm one that used to have sort of that kind of
he sees my
pushback
wisdom now.
Well, is that it actually, I needed it the most. Mm-hmm. I needed to be doing this stuff the most. I was the least in tune with some of these things, right? And maybe that's you out there that, so there is good wisdom, and who does, if you really are a person that wants to grow, doing these things is a really good way of growing and actually healing, and not using maladaptive coping strategies, right, to get your needs met in unhealthy ways. So if you want to grow, want to be mature, these are tried and true pathways to actually getting there. Are they funny? Yeah. Can you joke around about it without hurting somebody? You bet. It's kind of silly. And yet it's profound in how it actually works and the purpose behind it to give us some new neural pathways, right?
Yeah.
To actually heal. So I just
thank
wanted
you for the validation and the backing up, because I do get it. There are certain personality types, and then obviously communities where we really push down our emotions and see emotions in a negative way. And so the language I'm using is a bit cheesy. I own it. I have a history of being cheesy, but it works. And so I think for the validation there, but really it is that next step. It's not just I'm sad. It's what would it say? Because when you get a handle on what it would say, you actually know what to do about it. You know how to care for
practical.
it. So it's not ignoring it. You don't stop at number 3. You've got to go on to number 4, which is, what does it need to feel comfort or peace? So if you're angry, often there's an action step or an injustice that needs to be made right. Sometimes it's, I just really need a hug. I mean, it can be as practical as I need some food right now, or I need to talk about this, or I need a journal, or I need to pray, or I need to remember a truth that it's not all up to me, or that loss. So in this case of following the sadness, let's just say I'm grieving as a mom and sad just for my girls for a situation that they're in the middle of. I can't fix it. They really have to move through it. And so I can be sad. And what I need for comfort is to give myself a chance, apart from my girls, to process that, to not put that on them. But so I would go to Jeff, I would maybe journal with the Lord, I would go to a friend to be able to talk about my sadness. And I know this as a merchant. If I talk it out, my emotions will move on. Mm-hmm. And my cognitive innovator will try to think about ways to solve the problems. But this isn't something to solve. This is just something to feel, to heal it. Okay. So what does it need? I just need to talk about it. And I just need to be reminded that this too will pass. My girls, that these kinds of situations in their lives actually is growing muscles, and they're going to be okay. And then that last step, number 5, is to actually take an action step or advocate. So often we'll walk ourselves through what emotion, give it a voice. What does it need? Where is it in the body? But then we do nothing about it. And we know we need to do something like, I know I need a hug from Jeff, but I'm too busy and I just move through my day and I wake up the next day, right? Instead of going and just getting that hug and saying, Jeff, I really need a hug. And Jeff goes, sure, I can give you a hug. Those are the ways that we can advocate for ourselves instead of waiting, woe is me, for somebody to give me a hug. And I need to advocate to care for my emotion. This is part of the maturing process. This is harder to do, and it takes practice. But it's what we're learning as leaders in our home, in our community, in our workplace, is to regulate our own emotions, to take care for those, and then invite safe people like your spouse, if they're safe, and a friend, your relationship with God, your coach, your counselor, to help you with that. And then if we have kids or those behind us, We want to help them do the same. And as we model this well, we are creating a different kind of system that says emotions aren't the enemy.
Mhm.
It's what we do with them that matters. And so how can we listen to them? And then how can we guide them? How can we lead them so that they get their need met in a healthy way,
Mhm.
not in an unhealthy way? So I'm
Yeah.
going to say one more thing. I know I talked a lot, but to guide us towards the unhealthy. When we don't do this, this is where
It's
all of our,
predictable.
well, this is where all our maladaptive coping
Yeah.
strategies come in. This is when we drink too much. We're mean and we say things we don't want to say.
Escaping to work.
We're workaholics. All the alholisms.
Mhm.
Did I say that right? The isms. The olics. Okay. All of the maladaptive coping strategies.
Yeah.
They end up coming out of a lot of ignored undercurrents of emotional needs that aren't being met.
That's it. So back to the original point, we'd love to have everybody in kindergarten begin to understand all this stuff as early as possible so that they can get as many reps as possible, learning how to get their needs met in healthy ways, right? Because if you spend more and more and more time in your life, if that was your story where you didn't get your needs met in healthy ways, you already know what happened. Your story, you could tell your story, and you're discovering hopefully how to do that in a healthier way. But it's hard. It's harder to learn that later. So doing the hard work, we say to our leaders, like to get your trauma baggage down to carrying on size. It's hard work, but it's worth it, right? In order to have that kind of legacy change, scenario, right? We're not passing trauma on to the generations, which is what happens. We inherit some and we build our own, and then we give it to others unless we're getting it down, in size. And that isn't something you do alone. And it's so practically worth it, right? Don't you want to be a person? I know I do. I mean, more and more, I want to be a person that is not using others to get my needs met in an unhealthy way, more and more and more. I want to be better at regulating, right? And getting needs met in healthy ways so that I can be available actually to love and to serve others, right? That's the whole point, whether it's at work and thinking about the people that you work with and work for, or it's at home, wherever you might be. You're a better human. Regardless of your worldview, you're a better human when we do this with intention.
I want to be careful, Jeff, that we're not giving the impression that you don't need it's all up to you to regulate your emotions, because I can see that being used in such a shaming, and have seen it used in really abusive dynamics where it's kind of like, go get yourself together. And when you are able to regulate or be more mature, then we can talk. And that's even abusive. Used in parenting that can make a child feel very isolated in those emotions. And so part of our growing is the more mature person in the relationship by power, meaning like if I'm the parent, I have the power in the room, is the one responsible. And then as a couple, so let's be honest, sometimes I work to regulate while you're needing to emote, and vice versa. You're trying to stay regulated while I'm needing emote or trying to emote. And then sometimes we got to just take a time out because we're really both in a bad place, and we try to come back again together when we're calmer. But when one of us is hurting, or what the analogy from Dr. Gary Landreth would be is if someone's drowning in a pool, that isn't the time to be like, get your stuff together. It's your fault that you drowned or you're drowning. I told you not to swim. Like, that's what we do to each other when someone's really emotional and feeling overwhelmed, rather than helping them get to the side of the pool, get grounded, and then be able to really have kind of a more cognitive conversation. But that is a really important part of this equation, is we work on our own emotional health, but we also need each other to be doing this. And we can't do this just by ourselves.
Yeah, that picture that you just gave of the person drowning and then the other person standing on the sidelines, is the picture that we use to talk about empathy. And it really is the thing that changes, is the gold currency of communicating. It's a pathway towards really helping another person that's dysregulated kind of come back, right? Come back to a regulatory state, right? And metaphorically, if they're drowning because they're yelling and they're out of control, or they're withdrawn and they're shut down, or they're in a space where they're manipulating and they don't know what to do, whatever state they might be in, a dysregulated state, to be able to see that person and be the person that's regulated and say, I see that you're naming it, right? I see that you're angry right now. I'm here. And to be able to kind of throw a life ring, out towards them. You don't jump in the water with them. A drowning person isn't going to help you, and you're not going to be able to help them actually make it. You'll drown too. So it's standing from a place of regulation, offering them a ring. I'm here. I'm not leaving. I've got you. We're going to get through this. That actually literally changes things in their brain and allows them to kind of calm down. And that is to get out of a survival mentality in that space. You can make it worse. We're all good at that, right? Yeah. By doing the things that Terra just described, telling them like, I told you how to swim already, how you were going to remember, or, all this kind of stuff.
What's your problem? Why are you overreacting? Just stand up. You're not drowning.
Yeah. Why don't you take a time out? And when you're ready, come on back to me, Mr. or Mrs. Maturity. And then we can have a civil conversation like that. That goes really well, doesn't it? Especially in marriage, right? No, it doesn't. Yeah. We got to, empathy is the gold currency of communication, and a real way in which we can offer the kind of care to help somebody who's dysregulating. And don't you appreciate that when someone does that for you? I know I do. It's actually really humbling when I'm dysregulated and you or someone else, like my kids, actually are like the one that's like, I see you're upset, and it's so humbling. And that's, I think, a beautiful gift that we can give to each other, especially in marriage, in relationship, and with our kids, is just to give. We talk about saving some of the best for those you love the most. This is the place where you really want to practice that.
Yeah. Are you done? Okay. I thought I was going to interrupt. You're making such a key point in that empathy, and going back to Dr. Siegel's hand model and the way the brain works, is that when the research is really clear, when given an empathetic response, somebody who actually sees us, helps us name the emotion, not in a belittling way, but in a very soft and a kind gentleness, to say, I see you're angry, or you're really frustrated right now. I'm here with you. That actually calms the brain down. The blood literally comes back into the frontal lobe, and the lid actually goes back on the brain. And we now connected the emotional and the cognitive brain, and somebody's able to actually start thinking a little more grounded and more cognitive in their drowning. So they feel like they're on the side of the pool, and they're able to calm down and now to have a more rational conversation. So empathy is such a powerful gift we give to one another, as Jeff's saying, the gold currency in any healthy relationship. We often offer a couple more steps before empathy when you're trying to have a really intentional conversation. But when somebody's drowning, empathy is the good go-to. Just, I see you're hurting. I see you're upset. You look like you're having a really bad day. And really practicing that on a regular basis so it becomes more authentic. It can feel very rote sometimes when people are learning how to stay present. Asking a question like, what's wrong, can feel interrogative. It doesn't feel very inviting, and it can actually keep somebody feeling the floodedness of their emotions. So naming the emotion that you see in front. This works beautifully for parenting. We do a lot of teaching parents how to do this in play therapy. And parent coaching is really being able to name the emotion for a child. They don't know what they feel. So when you say, you're really upset, what are you feeling right now? They don't know. They're children. Most 45-year-olds don't even know what they feel. So being able to name and say, it seems like you're really anxious right now. And they go, yeah, my tummy hurts. I'm really anxious. What's anxious? And then we can talk about what anxious is. But being able to join one another requires one of us to be regulated. And if we can't be, the invitation is to take some time to pull away. 30 minutes that Jeff reminded us of is all it takes, really, for the brain to calm down. Do something different. Go figure out what it is that your emotion is. Where's it in the body? What does it need? What's it saying? What does it need to calm down? And then be able to re-enter in and to care for one another. It is so hard to be in healthy relationships and to take turns caring for one another and to bearing one another's burdens and to come in with not a harsh word, but to be slow to speak and quick to listen and to really come in with gentleness and compassion. This is hard work. If you can tell, maybe you can't tell, but Jeff and I can be a little spicy in our conversations. And so we'll end with a little of using our relationship just to kind of model the how to and how we might walk through real life situation.
Oh boy,
so,
here we go.
Here we go. We didn't talk about which one. Okay. So this morning, this is real. I'm feeling a lot. I have no clue yet why, because I'm still learning sometimes why, but Jeff can tell. I'm pretty testy. I'm short. I feel my breath is short. I know often that anxiety shows up in my body when I'm not breathing and I'm talking fast, and I start to get annoyed really easily. So I might start with the emotion. I feel annoyed, but it's really not annoyed. It's actually, I feel anxious and dismissed. And I don't even feel that way by Jeff. I actually feel that way, I've figured out, by a few other situations that happened this morning.
Before our meeting.
Yeah. And so doing a good job of trying to regulate that. We had a scheduled meeting. We have a regular weekly business meeting where we talk as husband and wife about our businesses first. And then we have another time when we talk about our relationship and our hearts and how we're doing. So this is our business meeting. And Jeff is noticing. So what did you do, Jeff, when you're noticing that I'm not in my best place?
I hope I did a good job, but I was trying. I noticed, I said, it seems like I'm kind of an inconvenience for you right now in this meeting. I'm wanting to be helpful. I'm really happy to be here, and we're working through this, but I'm feeling like I'm an inconvenience to you. And so I had a curious question. I didn't blame. I offered that feedback, and then I listened.
And I think your body language was calm. You saying it wasn't when you're all better, we'll have a meeting. I'm out of here. You stayed present. You physically stayed present. You emotionally stayed present, and you stayed calm. And I'm starting to go, oh, who's the one that's off her rocker right now? It's me. Because he's calm and I'm feeling something that I don't want to feel right now. And so I said to Jeff very clearly, I said, I don't know what is going on or why I'm upset yet. It doesn't feel like it's about you. But if we can, let's try to get through our meeting and then I'll figure it out. Well, it didn't take much longer. Maybe a half hour later, I came back and I go, I think I figured it out. And I was able to say, here's what I'm feeling and why I was acting that way.
While we were still meeting as well.
Now, if I was even more healthy and mature, I would have said, will you forgive me, Jeff, for being
Keep growing, honey. Keep growing.
But I haven't done that yet. So I'll do that live with you present. Will you forgive me, Jeff, for being snarky with you this morning and you were trying to be so patient with me?
Yes. I will need the same grace tomorrow.
Yes. So that is the reality. And I think marriages and in relationships with friendships, particularly female friendships, male friendships maybe too, but female friendships with our kids, sometimes we think emotions are running interference in health of our relationships.
They can be.
And well, to my point is that they don't have to. They actually add to the intimacy and the fuel of your relationship. A relationship without emotions, you're missing out on memories. It adds color. If you think about all your memories from your childhood, the ones you remember the most are the ones filled with emotion, negative or positive. Emotions are the things that help our brain capture the memories and to hold tight. So emotions actually can be the real glue if you can move through them, not only by yourself and with the help of God and maybe a counselor or a coach or somebody that helps you practice, but also with a safe person who can continue to be a safe regulator for you and bring comfort when you need care.
So if you feel like they may be running interference, you need to ask these questions that we talked about today instead of just suppressing it and go, it's
Yeah.
emotions are creating interference, and so they're bad, they're not good. Do the work actually
Yeah.
to kind of investigate it and redeem the emotional piece, because that's
Yeah.
actually a tell. It's a signals that are
Mm-hmm.
coming from your body and your brain and how you were made, and to work through them
Yeah.
and so that you can experience the color, you can have the memories, you can redeem these pieces.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. And I got this horrible picture. We always say, like, if you haven't processed your emotions, eventually they're going to back up and leak. And I got the picture of a backed up sewage. Like, like
Oof.
you just, if you keep just shoving it down, that stuff gets piled up and eventually you're going to have like a leakage and it's going to be a worse mess. So it's better to start learning how to deal. And some of us have, you might be further in your journey and you've never really looked. So this is where somebody who's trained, this is what we do at Living Wholehearted, especially our professional counselors are really trained on the high levels of trauma. And especially when there's a lot of things we don't want to look at, we don't want to feel again. And it's understandable because there's just so much hurt and pain in some of our stories and a lot of our stories. So having a professional help you clean that out little by little to pace yourself is really important. And those of us who aren't trained, I want to give a word of wisdom to not dismiss or shame people who have to do this at a slower pace. Oftentimes we don't know what we don't know about their story. So I'm speaking particularly for those in church ministries or lay helpers who are trying to help somebody and they get really frustrated. So send to professionals who are trained to help people and understand really how to work alongside somebody's not only childhood story, but what's been happening in their neurobiology and in their body.
Yeah, I was to say two things and then I'll be done. But the first is that healthy people get help. Okay. So that's the facts, and it's good. It's a journey, right? So sometimes there's seasons where you're doing that more intensely and sometimes you're not, but you're feeling that need and that pull. Listen, take steps, be realistic, continue the growth of becoming more wholehearted in your life. You and everybody in your wake will benefit, right? If you don't, everybody in your wake is going to pay. It's just a matter of time. We like to say that. So join us in continuing that work. We're doing it too. The second thing is that I'm reminded of the fact that the Eagles, the great band, the Eagles, they spoke about the inner child in one of their songs, and they patronize the inner child, right? Like it's like I won't go into the line because they swear in it, but it's like they'd like to find the inner child and basically beat it up, right? Well, how did that work out for the Eagles, the band that broke and that is still broken to this day
Sewage
in many
leakage.
ways? Okay, it's notorious. So you got to do the work. If you don't, it's just a matter of time, right? So do the work, work.
And it really is such a key part to all the relationships that matter most to you. Your relationship with God, your spouse, your kids, and those that are in your wake of influence in your community and at your workspace. This is really, if you didn't work on anything else, learning how to attune to your emotions and the emotions of others will transform every relationship. So hopefully this is a little bit of a help if you want more. So a couple of resources. My book, Courageous, Being Daughters Rooted in Grace, was specifically written to women and to moms of daughters. And if you're a dad or you work with women, you might appreciate it because it teaches you a bit about the deeper needs of women. And I've got a chapter in there on emotions called She Feels It to Heal It. And it really goes into the depths of this a little bit more. There's quite a few other great books. One of our dear friends, Tristan Collins and John Collins of the Bible Project, they wrote the book Why Emotions Matters. That's a great resource to get you started. You can also go to livingwholehearted.com where you can find our executive coaches. We do a lot of this work with the coaching element. And you can go to our professional counselors. We've got an amazing team that can come alongside you. livingwholehearted.com. So if you've enjoyed this, leave a review, share it with a friend, and we look forward to the next time we get to connect with you. Until then, be the leader you would follow.
Well, did you know that we're not just podcasters? One of the best ways to connect with Terra and I and our whole team at Living Wholehearted is our website, livingwholehearted.com. There you're going to find the books that we've written, our e-courses, executive coaching, organizational development, and professional counseling services. And then one of our favorite things that we're up to these days, our Wholehearted Leadership Cohorts, where we take groups of leaders for 1 to 2 year journeys together. It's amazing. While you're there, for fresh content, make sure that you sign up for our e-newsletter. That's where we're putting out stuff every month that you want to keep close with. So visit livingwholehearted.com.
You can also join us on socials at living_wholehearted on Instagram, and we are Living Wholehearted on Facebook. You can also follow me at Terra Mattson on Instagram. We love to engage with you personally there, so make sure you reach out. Leave us a review if you're enjoying this podcast.
Hey, thank you for caring about being the kind of person and leader that lives with integrity.